I'd like to thank all of you for coming to our event. My name is Susan Ferrantino. I'm on the board for the league, and I've been the moderator or the chair for this event for years, and it's so much fun. It's obviously my favorite event. We always get a great turnout. We always have a great conversation. I'd like to thank the legislators that are here. They always make a great effort to attend. We have Representative Aaron Coffer, Senator John Udechak, Representative Eddie Dapashinsky, and Representative Mike Carroll. The other legislators, most of them had a previous engagement, so they were unable to attend, but I found that it doesn't matter the number, we're still going to have a very lively debate. I'd like to also thank Kings. They've been hosting this event for years, and they always do a great job. I also want to point out that Dr. Tom Baltino from Wilkes is here with several of his students. I also have two students here who are volunteering that are sitting at the table here, Stephanie Chaga and Gabby Fitzgerald. And I know there's another student here from Kings. I have your name here, Rob. Rob Sudnick is here to do a story on the legislative breakfast. And there's an education conference next door, so we're overwhelmed, I think. So the format for the breakfast is pretty simple. I will start with some questions from the league, and the first question will go to the first legislator, and then on, and then the second question will go to the second legislator. We don't like to time the event. It's not a debate, but I will have to rein in some of the long-winded answers. We like to keep the questions, to about 2-3 minutes, and certainly if the legislator feels that enough has been said and they want to move on or agree, we can get to the next question. That's usually the format too. My students will be collecting questions from the audience. In a few minutes they'll be out, and I will integrate those into our questions a little towards the end of the event. Okay? So I will start with our first question is going to cover Independent Redistricting Commission, which the League is an advocate for because it's a huge nonpartisan issue. A growing number of other states have already adopted independent restricting methods with strong popular support and none of the negative consequences predicted by opponents. Do you support the creation of an independent citizens redistricting commission for Pennsylvania's congressional and legislative redistricting? Representative Coffer.
Thank you, and thank you to the League as always. It's a pleasure to be here. So I do support the concepts, both House Bill 22 and 23 this session. They're actually two separate bills, one for the congressional districts, one for the legislative districts, I believe is the way it's currently being done. So I say that only because the language actually isn't online. I was just asked about them yesterday and actually tried to pull up the language of the bills, and it's not available right now. So I do have to say with that caveat that I haven't actually seen the language. If it's similar to what it has been in the past, I will support it. With that, I mean, obviously it's been an issue. We've had the Supreme Court that has stepped in Pennsylvania, and for whatever it's worth, I think that has not been a positive thing for what has moved forward. I think that the districts are wrong, but to say that the Supreme Court should be stepping in to redo the districts, there was no constitutional authority for that, in my opinion. I think it was definitely an overstep of what the legislative authority is. Did they put the appropriate measures in place? That's a question to be determined, I guess, and that's for people to decide. But the districts are wrong, but two wrongs don't make a right, and I think it's bad precedent to leave it up to the courts, which will become increasingly more political now as time goes forward, if they ultimately have the say consistently to say, we can deem these maps unconstitutional whenever we want. And so I think that increase that will happen over time of the politicization of the courts can be a very problematic issue going forward. Currently, they serve as a swing vote on the way that redistricting happens. There's two from the majority and minority of House and Senate, and the court has always been the fifth vote on that commission. So with that sort of being the key issue as this will move forward, I think you're going to see a much more political court moving forward. So yes, that did solve the problem in the short term, but in the long term, I think we have bigger issues with what happened with the Supreme Court in turning that over.
Thank you. Senator Utrecht.
Thank you, and good morning. First, let me thank and commend the League of Women Voters. No organization and the individuals of your organization, no one has done more for fair redistricting in Pennsylvania. I support both bills, the House and Senate version. I disagree with my good friend and colleague, Representative Coffer, on the court's action. The courts are the guardian of the Constitution in Pennsylvania. Clearly, the way the maps were drawn on the congressional side, those districts were unconstitutional. You're usurping people's right to select their representative in the U.S. Congress and replacing that right with partisan rule. And all you have to do, when the districts were made fair by the court, the voters were able to select their representatives, and it changed the face of Pennsylvania. New Democratic congressmen and women, and new state senators, 5 new Democratic state senators, and I believe 11 in the House. And all of that was because those districts were redrawn in fair fashion to represent communities of interest and to represent people's right to choose their representatives. And that's what we need to do in an independent commission to do redistricting in Pennsylvania. And we want to make sure that every vote counts, every person's voice is heard, and that community interests are held together.
Thank you. Representative Paszynski.
Yes. Thank you very much, and dittos once again to the League of Women for participating in the political process. The phrase that's always used, of the people, by the people, and for the people. If the people are engaged, there'll be no shenanigans. When the people are not engaged, that's when the things go awry. And that's why you have the League of Women Voters, to make sure that you question your representatives and your senators and your congressmen and so on. Because unless you are directly involved and informed to the actual facts and truth, you're always going to have some slipshod and some very questionable practices that go on. It's called life. It's called human beings. Human beings are imperfect. And I'm sure in our own lives we can look back and see how certain things have transpired in our personal life as well as in our community, in our clubs, in anything. The nature of a human being is really quite interesting. We are a country of rule of law. If we do not have rule of law and we do not follow rule of law, this would be mayhem. Mayhem. Without religion and rule of law, we would be animalistic. It sounds crazy. Go back in time in history. Who ruled the world? The most powerful. That was it. So look, America, this great experiment of the people in charge, has worked for nearly 300 years. And it will continue to go on to give you the power as long as you're involved. The senator said it perfect.
Thank you.
Wait.
Okay.
Let me finish up.
I'm sorry.
Let me finish up.
Excuse me.
The senator said it right. He did say it perfect. Our government is checks and balances. Got it? And when the checks and balances are not in balance, then we have the improprieties. That's it.
Thank you. Representative Carroll.
I said to the folks at the back table, when Carroll and Paszynski are on the same panel, you'll see the difference between left brain thinking and right brain thinking. It's going to be on full display. Good morning, everybody. As I said, I'm Mike Carroll, and it's a pleasure to be here with the League. The very direct answer to the question is yes, of course, I support redistricting reform. What the folks in the room need to know is that when you do redistricting reform, there are two different problems that you have simultaneously. Congressional redistricting, which is done by the passage of a bill and a change in the law with respect to how that occurs, and then State House and State Senate redistricting, which is going to require a constitutional change, much more complicated and a whole lot more that's involved there. Passage 2 consecutive sessions, identical, and then a referendum statewide. There was a reference made to the Supreme Court's decision to redraw the congressional districts. There's no doubt that had to happen. The redistricting that was done back after the last census, that I voted for. It was one of the worst votes I ever cast. But the reality is that those districts were horribly drawn, and the repair, before the court did the repair, the court gave the General Assembly the opportunity to fix those districts, and the General Assembly chose not to do anything. So before the Supreme Court actually redrew the lines, the opportunity was presented and time was given to the General Assembly to make the repair, and there was a decision, conscious decision, not to do that. So at the end of the day, the Supreme Court had to step in. They were right to do so. Sometimes when I hear that we think that the court is being politicized, I think that for me, my years here, sometimes folks who say that don't like the makeup of the Supreme Court because it happens to be populated now by folks that are a little bit more progressive compared to a little bit more conservative. And so redistricting reform, I'm not sure how this unfolds over the course of the next 2 years. It's really challenging. So far, the majority party has made a decision that the status quo is better than change. And amazingly, the status quo with the redistricting this time will involve a Democratic governor, short of some catastrophe. Wolf will still be the governor after the census and when we redraw the lines in 2021. And, you know, the Supreme Court and the ability for them to appoint the 5th member of the commission on the State House and State Senate redistricting. So the dynamics are very different with respect to how the lines will be drawn after 2021 or after the 2020 census. But so far, the majority party in both chambers has made a calculation that they'd rather stick with the status quo than go down the path of change. So, you know, as I have said to many in this room, at least the 3 of us on this panel, the 3 Democrats, have no ability to put a bill on the calendar. Only the majority party can do that. And until or unless the majority party decides to put House Bill 22 or Senate Bill 22 or one of the others on the calendar, we'll have a debate in the atmosphere, but no actual votes.
Thank
So,
you.
can I just jump in really quickly? So, I come from the principle that the districts are fundamental to preserving democracy. That it's absolutely critical to where this all comes from. But Representative Carroll quickly mentioned about results. Well, there were something like 40 Democrats that voted for these districts. And after Republicans won some of these swing districts, then the Democrats didn't like the districts anymore either. So it's not just the court change that has happened. But I do believe they were improper. I come back to that. But Senator Udicek mentioned about 2 different issues, and I think it's important in clarifying where sort of I'm at. I don't think it's wrong in and of itself for the court to strike down the districts in and of itself. It's wrong for them to actually draw the districts. It was something that should have gone back to a legislative process that should have been done. It should have been done through the legislature with the court being the deciding vote. That's the way it's done in the law. That's the way is actually the remedy that should have been. It should not have been left up to the courts to determine because there is not a check and balance on that system of how they are going to draw it. We don't know how they determined to make those districts, that there is no transparent process. And I think transparency is what everybody is looking for when they're talking about an independent commission to redraw the districts. When you have just Supreme Court justices saying, we're going to draw this and here's the map, that is not transparent. You know, I do have an issue with that. And so, I mean, did we get rid of one bad system and did we replace it with another? Yes, but I'm not sold that this is the right system that we should be having to preserve democracy and oversight over the way our district should be.
Thank you.
The court gave the General Assembly the opportunity to redraw the lines, and the General Assembly chose not to.
Thank you. The next question will first be addressed to Senator Udicek. Governor Wolf has announced a major new infrastructure initiative, Restore Pennsylvania, funded by the monetization of a common sense severance tax. Could you please elaborate on that for us?
Sure, thank you. The Restore Pennsylvania is about imposing a responsible and fair severance tax on the natural gas industry to monetize that revenue to generate $4.5 billion to invest in public infrastructure projects in all 67 counties, all 2,800 municipalities in Pennsylvania. I am the prime sponsor of Restore Pennsylvania in the Senate. I have a Republican colleague and friend, Senator Tom Killian of Delaware County. He is the primary sponsor along with me. It's a bipartisan bill. We just had another Republican senator to sign up to be a part of that, Senator Mensch. This is a bold bipartisan idea. I think the governor, you've seen the governor evolve on this issue, starting with a $1 billion severance tax in his first budget for education. That was never going to pass the General Assembly. There's winners and losers when you talk about driving money out in education. A lot of our rural friends think of Pittsburgh and Philadelphia receiving all of those funds. Whether that's true or not, it's the politics of the matter. The governor now recognizes that we need to have a severance tax conversation outside of the budget conversation. And he recognizes that every county, every municipality has an infrastructure need, whether it's a flood control project in Avoca, whether it's a stormwater system in the Wyoming Valley, whether it's roads, whether it's bridges, whether it's broadband. We need to invest in Pennsylvania in our infrastructure. It sets the stage for public safety. It sets the stage for economic growth. So Restore Pennsylvania is about helping every county and every community. Right now with an impact fee, that impact fee is very narrow, benefits generally the counties where gas is being produced, and that impact fee is not based on production. It's based on wells drilled. The industry has evolved. Technology is greater and greater each year. They are drilling less wells. They are called these spider veins that come out from one well, and you may be able to go out with 12 limbs like an octopus, and we're not generating any revenue. But they are generating tremendous amounts of profit. It's not a punitive tax. It's a fair tax that would generate another $300 million on top of the impact fee. That wouldn't go away, but we would be able to monetize that money and invest in the communities and invest in the economic development throughout Pennsylvania, not just those that are benefiting from the natural gas.
Thank you. Wow, those teachers were really pleased with your answer, I think. Representative Paszynski, do you want to add anything?
Of course.
Yes.
And I think we should move this forward because they're having a heck of a good time next door. I don't know what they're doing. Kudos to the senator and to Senator Killian for a bipartisan effort along with the governor. I think all of us are aware of the fact that we have not had a severance tax. We call an impact fee. The impact fee primarily goes to the host community, of which we agree, because the host community has to deal with the business factors and the industrial factors relative to drilling for gas. But I want you to think about the fact that, you know, the natural gas constitutionally belongs to who? You. It's your gas, okay? Now, with all due respect to those drillers, they knew about this gas for a bazillion years, and they changed the law back in 2002 to take them out of the system of taxing that fuel, just because oil and coal, they are taxed. So in the 10 years that they have operated, we have lost a minimum of $2.5 to $3 billion. So what could that have been used for in Pennsylvania? The time has come, and we can't continue to allow for the misinformation about the system. Let me just throw out a couple numbers to you. We have had a number of hearings relative to the operation of gas drilling. And one of the first questions that I ask at the hearing is, to the companies that are being questioned, what's your profit margin? They won't tell you. Well, what did you gross? Well, you got to multiply the amount of the gas per 1,000 cubic feet times how many cubic feet we've extracted, and that's what it is. I said, you can't give us any, no. I said, Answer me this question. I've heard that we have 25 years of natural gas, 50 years of natural gas. Nope, we have 100 years of natural gas, and with all the new technology and Utica below it, it's 200 years. So I said, well, then that means you know you're going to get your investment back, don't you? So what would be a fair tax? We don't want to hurt the companies, but what would be a fair tax to the people of Pennsylvania? They don't tell you that. Listen, a year ago, they withdrew 5.1 trillion cubic feet of gas. That was worth $7.8 billion at about $1.50 and $1.60 per thousand cubic feet. Right now, it's definitely $2.50 to $2.60. So if they withdrew the same 5.1 trillion cubic feet, you're up to 13, 14 billion. Do you think you can afford $1 billion back to the people? So my point to you is this. I don't know what that magic number is, but the senator's good work and the governor have come up with a number that says, you know what, this is fair to the people, and it's certainly fair to the companies. This is where we need now the people to get on board and push that issue, because it's your resource and it will become your money. All of that infrastructure, that's jobs. And how do they expect us to pay for things? Through taxes. So when you have a job, you pay things, right? You pay taxes and you buy stuff. That's how it works. So get on board, help the senator and the governor. Let's pass Restore PA.
Thank you. Representative Carroll.
Thank you. Nearly every member of the General Assembly that I know, except for the very conservative members, have ideas on things that they want to do that come with a price tag. Everybody, depending on where you come from in the Commonwealth, whether it's the city of Philadelphia or the most rural parts of the state, generally those communities have some things that they need improved. And the improvements have an actual price tag with them. Now, the challenge in Harrisburg is a lot of members want to do something special for their region or their community with the full knowledge that it has a cost, but have no real direct plan to figure out how to pay for it. It's sort of the nebulous, I want to do a flood control project in a community, and somehow the general fund will pay for it, and I don't have to raise a tax in any way. I would suggest that one of the reasons why those projects and those needs continue to exist, whether it's broadband or road repairs or flood control projects and so on and so forth, is because the belief that the money exists somewhere in the budget to do those things really does not exist. There has been a tremendous scaling back with respect to the opportunities to fund projects, and one of the primary reasons is because of the lack of participation from the federal government in terms of funds available to the states. And so, at least with the Restore PA, and I applaud Senator Yudichak and Governor Wolf and others for their leadership on this, there's at least a sincere funding mechanism to do the projects that folks want to do in their communities. For everybody that says they want to help build a library, they want to do a road project, or they want to do a flood control project, tell me how you're going to pay for that. And if you don't have a plan to pay for it, then I really do question the sincerity of your desire to get it done. And so, at least with the Restore PA, as the Senator said, off budget, we will have dedicated funds to do very particular projects throughout the state, and every one of the 67 counties can participate and benefit. And so I am hopeful that somewhere along the way, we will have a real conversation about the natural gas industry and an extraction tax. The Senator knows this story, but I'll just share it really quickly. There's a member that we both know from South Philly, a former member, and he said that if you gave the natural gas industry a pencil and a paper and told them write down what tax you want to pay, they wouldn't have had the nerve to write down zero. And that's where it ended up as a result of the negotiations that occurred back when we were all in the House and we passed the severance tax bill when the Democrats were in the majority, and it ended up that it ended at zero when the wheels of government ended up resulting in no tax. So we need to do something with natural gas. There's no serious conversation about income tax and sales tax in Pennsylvania, and I'm not eager to vote for an income tax or a sales tax for the residents of Pittston and North Pocono until at least the natural gas industry pays their fair share.
Thank you. Representative Coffer.
Well, I agree with a lot of pretty much what everybody said, but let me just follow it back on my end. So I am a Republican who has voted for an extraction tax before. We voted out of the Finance Committee. I was one of 3 or 4 Republicans that voted in favor of it out of our Finance Committee. So the House version of the bill we have not seen yet. I know that Senator Udicek, he just told me he's going to share the language of his bill with me. But our Finance Chairman, Jake Wheatley, is the one who is working on the bill in the House. And so I actually met with Jake earlier this week and asked him for the language. He does not have the language yet, so I'm waiting to see exactly what he's looking to do. So I haven't seen the specifics yet, but the overall principle and the overall goals are something I definitely support. And I represent the town of West Pittston, which, as probably a lot of you know, has been devastated many times in the recent years, and parts of Exeter Township and others that have really been hit very hard by this flooding. And I'm very cognizant of the needs and issues that are in my district, along with many others. This is something that I'm hoping can hopefully come back to pay some of the costs that might be associated with the stormwater fee as well. If we can get some of this money to pay for some of those projects that need to be done, that would be also a very positive use for what we can use here in Luzerne County. So, with sort of the caveat, and I hate to say that I don't know exactly what's in the bill itself, other than sort of the 30,000-foot view of it. I am in support of the principle.
Thank you. The next question will first be addressed to Representative Pashinsky. This is about funding for schools. Pennsylvania schools have received increased funding from the state, and there now exists a new fair funding formula. However, funding for our schools only consists of 11% of the total budget, which is $705 million out of $6.5 billion. What are your thoughts on driving additional dollars through this new formula for the most underfunded schools such as Wilkes-Barre, Hazleton, Scranton?
Well, thank you very much for your question. A lot of work has gone into trying to change the formula so that the most needed school districts are going to be funded at the appropriate level. There are some school districts in Pennsylvania that don't need any state funding, to be honest with you. They're very fortunate. They have some major industry, major companies there that are able to support those schools. And I think everybody that's in this room recognizes the importance of a public school system. That's also in our Constitution, isn't it? Because we want to make sure that every kid, no matter what side of the tracks they come from, have an opportunity to learn and grow and become whoever and whatever they want to be. So we have struggled probably since about 2011, when about $1 billion was cut out of the public school program. When that happened, there was a downward slide to all the school districts, especially in this area, where the state was funding their programs far less and demanding more, As I look in this audience, everyone in here appears to be at least no more than 35. But there was a time that you didn't have to worry about, and you didn't have, for example, special needs. Special needs is something that has been instituted, and rightly so, for those kids, for those families. It's important to them, but it comes at a tremendous cost, over $1.5–2 billion. That was something that wasn't involved before, and people forget about that. There's been some other things that have been instituted since those times. The charter school system, which was designed to provide something special and unique, and it is in most instances not. It's just another school teaching the same thing that the public school is, but you cherry pick people out. When a child leaves a public school and goes to a cyber school, that average cost goes to that cyber school. What do I mean? Well, your school system may, after paying for everything, figure out that the cost to educate the children in your school district is $9,000. Maybe in Northwest it's $8,000. Maybe in Dallas it's $12,000. When those kids go to that charter school, that $12,000 goes to that charter school. Not the actual cost, but that's the way the law is written. The actual cost of educating that child might be $5,000. So now that charter school's taking more money in that school. The only reason I bring these points up to you is because there's a greater need, a greater burden on the school systems to provide certain kinds of education because they're made into law. And then because the state doesn't fund your school district at the 50% level that it should be, the burden then becomes on the local to continue to provide football, art, music, whatever, speech therapy, and the burden now becomes on the local to provide that deficit. So the fair funding formula was worked on for quite a long time to try to put in all those different kinds of items in order to create a formula so when the money would come forward, certain schools would get more money than others. The unfortunate part is there's not enough money in the education budget to be able to fund it appropriately. So we're still struggling trying to find enough dollars to be able to balance it out. So it's a good effort, it's an improvement, but the question is where do we come up with new dollars to help balance that budget out? Wilkes-Barre's underfunded by about $30 million. They did have a fund balance of $17 million, but they've had to use some of that fund balance in order to operate. They've also made dynamic changes. They have cut programs. They have furloughed teachers. They're consolidating in order to be able to run that school fiscally well.
Okay.
So I'm sorry
Thank you. I
about
just
it,
want to
but
wrap it
as
up.
you can see, it's very complicated, and there's a lot of stuff there. I'm sorry about that.
No, it's-
Mike and the other guys will take care of
I
it.
didn't have a beard when that ended.
Thank you, Representative Paszynski.
Yes,
Representative
thank you,
Carroll.
Representative Paszynski, for that thorough answer. So for the folks in the room, some context. The fair funding formula, as described in the question, simply provides for the distribution of new money appropriated annually to the 500 school districts. So the base allocation that they had received prior to the fair funding formula, those numbers stay the same. And the fair funding, so when we allocate, say, $200 million in a budget to the public education of the 500 school districts, that $200 million only is run through the fair funding formula. The extraordinarily high number that was mentioned earlier in terms of the base allocation, that stays the same. And the challenge is for districts that are currently funded at, say, 75–80% of their overall school budget on the existing dollars that are allocated, as you can predict, they have no interest at all in running all of the money through the fair funding formula because by doing so, they'll get less. And nobody ever signs up for less. And so the fair funding formula was a product of a work group that was created by the passage of a bill, House and Senate, and the administration. And the best that could be done with respect to how to fund school districts in a fair way was a more fair distribution of new dollars. But there was no consensus at all with respect to the existing dollars that are flowed through the basic ed funding formula to the 500 districts. And it will take decades to get this to a total fair point when you have all of the money that will be allocated over the course of the next number of years run through the fair funding formula. As Eddie alluded to, somewhere in that answer, there's going to be a need for more money or a redistribution of the existing dollars. And that's going to be really hard. Either of those, because if you say to the reality is, I used to hear this all the time, Philadelphia gets all the money and it's unfair because Philly takes all the money. Well, first of all, Philly has the most students, but secondly, Philadelphia, in terms of their per student amount from the Commonwealth, probably less than the rural school districts in Northwest PA. I mean, you have rural school districts in Northwest PA that graduate maybe 100, 150 kids that are getting funded at 75–80% of their school budget. Now, they get less dollars, gross dollars, than Philadelphia, but on balance, they're doing better than a school district like Pittston area, for example. And so This is a real challenge. It's a lot of times in Harrisburg, things default to the common denominator, which affects everything, and that is money. And how you either allocate the existing dollars or find new dollars remains the central challenge. The fair funding formula was a very small step in the right direction.
Thank you. Representative Coffer.
Got to give credit to Representative Carroll again. He did a very good analysis of how the dollars exist within our education system in regard to the fair funding formula versus the existing dollars before the formula came into place. So there are, for the fair funding formula, which is my districts that benefit from the new formula, versus other districts that do not benefit, which view the fair funding formula as the unfair funding formula. And so when you have representatives all across the Commonwealth, you have winners and losers. So as we are trying to run more dollars through the new formula so that we get more dollars in the school districts that have been adversely impacted by that, you do not have consensus from other representatives who will be receiving less of a percentage of those existing dollars. So as we know there is a need to put these dollars through, there is not a consensus of it because there are so many that are hurt by the fair funding formula, which are versus the ones who benefit from the new formula. So that's a big piece. So I wanted to talk about special education costs. It is a huge issue that is going on throughout our school districts. I have been working with the Center for Independent Living. I know that there's a lot of school districts in our region that have relationships with the Center for Independent Living, working on workforce development for people with special needs that are actually trying to meet some of those requirements that come from federal law. And so there have been a lot of programs that have, in my opinion, have not been working as successfully as they can be. They do it at a much better cost in the private sector, but are working in conjunction with our school districts as partners to do this. So they can do it at a lower cost, at a higher quality. It's been something that I've been trying to get going here more in Luzerne County. It's something that is really active in Lackawanna County, that they've partnered with a lot of different schools throughout Lackawanna, Monroe, and some of those surrounding counties. So the special education costs and pension costs have been what's really been burdening our local school districts. I think if we saw the newspapers in the last week or two, a lot of the school board members are attributing it to the increase in special education costs. And it's real issues. And we have a lot of special education torts that are going on as well that are, there are a number of law firms that have moved into our area from other states that are pretty much using our school districts as piggy banks. They can sue our school districts, and the school district will settle because there's a financial incentive to settle than to take it into to court. And it's been a back and forth of there's about 3 or 4 lawyers who have been consistently suing our school districts in our area, and it's been really, like I said, a piggy bank for a lot of these firms. And a lot of this money is not going back to the quality of education for these special education students. It's going to pad pockets of attorneys. And so I have some concerns about the way this system is playing out. I think it has been becoming increasingly so over the past 3 or 4 years. Our school districts are actually now budgeting in their line items. They have a line item for special education torts. So they are actually planning every year about how many lawsuits they are going to go through because of this. And like I said, it's not because of the quality of education in most cases. Now, there are some, don't get me wrong, and they should be litigated. But there's a lot that are not about the quality of education. So another thing that I wanted to bring up that I'm working on to help reduce the costs, hopefully, with a lot of the focus on behavioral health in our schools and mental health. One of the things I've been working on is trying to partner with our counties to get some of the dollars for children and youth workers to actually be inside of our school districts. A lot of the dollars that have been out there, and a lot of focus and priorities have been on, we need teachers and guidance counselors more actively involved with the students to help identify students that might be having issues. And so by trying to prioritize some of these dollars to get a children and youth worker inside of every school district, help do some training as well. I have a bill that would help train guidance counselors and teachers in regard to identifying students with behavioral health issues or mental health issues, but to actually provide the dollars to have somebody located in the schools to help be that supportive network that a lot of students need. And so that's just another idea. I think a lot of the others have been covered. So
Thank you. Senator Udicek.
Thank you. Very quickly, I just want to underscore one point. We often hear in our age of politics of partisanship, Democrats and Republicans can't work together, can't get things done. On education, Governor Wolf has done an exceptional job of building a bipartisan coalition of good Republican legislators, like Aaron and many of his friends in the House and the Senate, who have stepped up and said, yes, we have to invest in education. When Governor Wolf came into office, we're investing about $7.5 billion in education. We are now approaching $9.5 billion. That's $2 billion in new money. And Governor Wolf said something that was inspiring to me in this last budget address, and I think he really gets where we need to be focused as a Commonwealth. He said he wants to build the best workforce in the nation. If we are going to compete for 21st century jobs, we need a skilled, educated, talented workforce. And that starts with K through 12. That starts with our community colleges and our universities, our career and technical schools. And if you look at this budget, you look at the last 4 budgets, it's all about investing in the people of Pennsylvania, investing in workforce development, investing in building that world-class workforce that'll make Pennsylvania the best economy in the country. So I applaud Governor Wolf, our Republican colleagues in the House and the Senate on education. We've had the bipartisan success. There's no question about it. We got to continue to do that.
Thank you. The next,
Could I just
briefly.
please? I know. There's just so many things that are so important about these questions. Coming back to education, when I first started, did we have prenatal care? Did we have pre-kindergarten? Did we have all-day kindergarten? No. Did we have breakfast? Did we serve the students breakfast?
Excuse me.
We didn't have lights. We didn't have running water. We didn't have desks. We didn't have books.
I'm going to provide.
But we forged ahead. We forged ahead.
Excuse me. I'm going to provide each of the legislators an opportunity at the end to talk about whatever they want as a last
No.
statement.
But this is on
So-
education, and it may be comical.
Okay,
But that's the cost. That's also the additional cost that wasn't there. So when you have, and you're feeding all the kids, and you're now taking care of them. And why are we doing that? Because the children are not coming to school prepared. They don't have a family. They don't have a learning experience at home. That's why we're doing the pre-K. That's why we're doing all day. Because if the child cannot learn by the 3rd grade, they fail. Now they become part of the prison system.
Okay,
So,
I think we're
Okay.
getting
All
a
right.
little ahead of ourselves.
It's really important.
I'll be very quick as well. I just a
Oh, my
quick little
goodness.
shout out because this deserves. So
there's a
Senator
question
Udicek
about the
did
minimum
comment
wage.
on this about support for bipartisan support. One of the things that we've gotten done too is the SHINE program, which a lot of you have seen a lot about, and that has been a bipartisan effort. I think that deserves some credit as well to some of this.
Okay, we're moving on. The next question goes to Representative Carroll, and this is, we've had some questions about the watershed fee, or the, what's the correct term? I'm sorry, I lost my note there. The stormwater fee, yes. And as I understand it, it's an executive order from the last administration through the EPA, so everybody has to pay it, but the states leave it to the municipalities on how they're going to conduct it and enforce it. So what kind of initiatives, if any, on the state level, or how are they controlling this, this fee, and how is it going to be administered fairly?
The pronoun "they" is interesting there because I'm not sure who the "they" is. The "they" is sort of broad in terms of the federal government, the state government, and municipal
Yeah.
government. This is really challenging because we do have an obligation to clean up the Susquehanna River and the Chesapeake Bay and to improve our watershed and the way we handle stormwater. And the effort to organize the communities is laudable, because there is economies of scale there that can be achieved to try and minimize the effect on the residents. The challenge that I see with respect to what's happened with the Wyoming Valley effort is that the communities and the residents of those communities haven't been fully informed as to the reasons why this is happening and the projects that are going to result with the use of the funds. I would prefer to have the Commonwealth be more of a partner with respect to the costs associated with the MS4, not just in the Wyoming Valley, but across the state. It seems to me that that should be a function of state government at some level. Not to minimize the need to have local participation, but to simply rely on the local residents and the local governments to do this seems to me a little bit unfair. And so I would hope that the outcry that you hear from the community at this point results in the brakes being put on this a little bit, insofar as we could take a second look at what programs, what projects need to be accomplished in the short term, what is the cost for those projects, and how does that reflect on a monthly fee for residents. And you know, whether $4.80 a month is an accurate number, or a higher number depending on the impervious surfaces, I'm not sure. It seems a little aggressive to me, but my suspicion is zero is not the right number either. And so, one of the most amazing things that you learn in government, I think, quickly, is that the dirtiest word in the dictionary, change. And when you're going to change something, it gets really hard, because people have an understanding of what the ground rules are and the way they live in their community. And when you're going to change one of those ground rules, it makes life complicated. So I accept as a given that there's going to be change, and that's going to result in differences, and it might even involve a fee. But I would hope that the Commonwealth could be more supportive of the effort and not just simply rely on the residents.
Thank you. Representative Coffer.
Thank you, and good beginning again. So it's good to be bipartisan here today. It's always a pleasure. But so this comes down from an unfunded mandate from the federal government, and so I look at this from a few different perspectives. It's now it's on our requirement from EPA, on our state Department of Environmental Protection, to enforce this. It is an unfunded mandate. There was supposed to be an unfunded mandate reform act back in the 90s of the federal government that they would not pass mandates without actually providing funding. I'm actually wondering where the legal pursuit of that is, and I actually am drafting a letter to our Attorney General in that regard to wonder if that has been looked at as an enforcement mechanism to actually enforce a mandate without the necessary funding that was supposed to be passed. That was during the 90s with the Republican Congress led by Newt Gingrich in conjunction with Bill Clinton. Dr. Baldino will be here to lecture afterwards. No, okay, never mind. So anyway, I do have those concerns legally about the mechanism, but that it's being enforced. But it's here. It's being enforced on us currently. So DEP is required to enforce this by the EPA. What can we do? And I think Representative Carroll touched on it, is that we can be partners and we can hope to come up with some of the money for this. I'm hoping that if this Restore Pennsylvania initiative goes forward, that's something. Representative Boback has put forward a plan that would allow some of the Act 13 money that's from the impact fee from the Marcellus Shale Fund to help fund this as well. So if we can use some of those dollars, that would be the county that could actually appropriate some of those dollars that they have to put towards this, as well as the state. And so, while we should be receiving federal money, and we just met with Congressman Muser yesterday about their need to step up to the plate to provide some of these dollars, I think there's one other thing that when this presentation was going on the first time I saw it in December, and it was a concern of mine, is that the way that this has been mapped out, the way that they finally got to this stormwater fee of having to enforce this, they have actually set up acid mine drainage to be next in the queue for something that has to be resolved at the local level, similar to what this is going on. And so that is actually the new sort of permit to start investigating and looking at. And if that's something that is going to impact our area, I think there's no secret that that will have a massive, massive impact on our communities. And so that was actually, I got, in that meeting, I sort of took it on a tangent, and I really am very concerned. We have billions of gallons of water flowing through our mines right here in the Susquehanna. So that's a huge concern of mine, especially with the mining heritage that we have in our community. But I wasn't sure if anybody else would talk about that, so I wanted to make sure I mentioned that.
Thank you. Senator Udicek.
Thank you. The MS4 mandate, the stormwater mandate that came down from EPA, it's been challenged in the courts. PA Farm Bureau challenged it. It's been upheld in the courts. Each individual municipality in that Chesapeake Bay watershed would have to implement an MS4 plan. Kingston and Wilkes-Barre have already been fined by DEP for not having a plan in place, tens of thousands of dollars. 32 municipalities, through their respective elected officials, reviewed the issue with their solicitor, with their engineer, and they recognized they could not tackle this unfunded federal mandate on their own. They went to the Wyoming Valley Sanitary Authority, who of course took up the charge on the sanitary side in the late 1960s to have a regional authority to address our sewer issues in the Wyoming Valley. They've stepped up to the plate to help these municipalities deal with this unfunded federal mandate. If the individual municipalities had to take on this challenge, you would be looking at anywhere from a $70 to $75 million property tax increase across the board in these municipalities. The plan that's in place right now at the Wyoming Valley Sanitary Authority is around $12 million to meet the 5-year permit process. That is continuing to come down as we work together as legislators, state and federal. I've met numerous times with Mike Bedrin, our regional director of DEP, and Secretary Patrick McDonald, the Secretary of DEP. There are issues that could help reduce that cost. And the Wyoming Valley Sanitary Authority, after a bumpy rollout, you have to understand, particularly many of the communities in the back mountain, and Senator Baker has pointed this out, aptly pointed it out, they had no relationship with the Sanitary Authority. So there was no history. And so it seemed to come out of the blue, even though this has been going on for a number of years. The Sanitary Authority is going to step up and put individuals in those communities and go line by line through the bills, understand how you could reduce that cost. They've already reduced the cost of those in the back mountain, those by about 54%. So there's been some misinformation, unfortunately, that has been spread in the news media and on the radio. It's an unfunded federal mandate that your communities are responding to the best that they can. Representative Coffer mentioned Restore Pennsylvania. When Governor Wolf came up to Luzerne County, we had a press conference, and it is not lost on me that he chose to roll out the most historic investment in public infrastructure here in Luzerne County, in recognizing that we have this stormwater issue that we're dealing with, and saying, do you want individual homeowners, individual municipalities to bear every cost of government, or should that be shared by the federal, state, and local? And so Restore Pennsylvania could help reduce the cost of meeting those MS4 regulations. I get a little concerned about some of our colleagues that have stepped out and called either for a suspension of the program or called for the program to go away. The Wyoming Valley Sanitary has invested millions of dollars, along with these 32 municipal partners, to undercut that effort. I applaud the Wyoming Valley Sanitary Authority and those municipalities for stepping up and doing something that's very difficult. To come to, you know how many times that we've done that in the Wyoming Valley, 32 municipalities, to come together in a regional effort? The last time was on the sanitary side in the late 60s. And a lot of folks, and a lot of municipalities, and a lot of politicians back in 1968 didn't think we needed sewers in the Wyoming Valley. And they didn't participate. And every one of those municipalities has tried to claw back in, to get back into that authority ever since. So it's an unfunded federal mandate. I don't like it. I don't like that we have to impose a fee on local homeowners. There should be a shared burden from the federal, state, and local level. We're going to continue to work with our partners. As Representative Coffer mentioned, we met with Congressman Music. We're going to do all we can to reduce that fee as best as we can.
Thank you. Representative Paszynski.
You'll be happy to know I'll relinquish my time for the time that I used on the other issue. I'll pass.
Thank you. By all means, speak to what you know. If you want to pass it along, that's fine. We cover more topics. I appreciate that. I have several questions from the audience regarding green industry and initiatives. I know that Governor Wolf has appointed a commission to study climate change. So the questions are pretty much geared to would you be interested in creating mechanisms to facilitate a green industry in Pennsylvania, or shift our jobs and economy towards clean and renewable energy to counter climate change.
It's me first?
Yes,
Okay.
yes, sorry, Representative Coffer.
So I just introduced a bill earlier this week. We had a big press conference with bipartisan support of 2 Democrats, 2 Republicans, myself being the prime sponsor, on a new solar energy bill that would change the way that solar energy is provided here in Pennsylvania. It was very interesting, and one of the Harrisburg newspapers noted, how do you get a rural Republican, a Lehigh Valley Democrat, and an inner-city Philadelphia legislator to partner with a suburban Republican from Luzerne County, all together to support a piece of legislation, and it was this piece of solar energy legislation. So I'm very excited for the bill that we just unveiled on Tuesday. What it will do, it actually provides a free market mechanism for people to be able to invest in solar energy and to be subscribers of solar energy, even not on their own property. Right now, you cannot invest outside of your own property. This allows a mechanism that if you want to have solar panels in somebody else's and you have multiple investors, and let's say everybody puts in 10% of the cost, that they can receive 10% of the benefits of solar energy. I think there's a lot of people, including myself, who want to be conscious of the way they consume energy. I mean, I personally, I bought a hybrid. I drive one because I wanted to make that personal decision. I would like to invest in something like this to have cleaner energy being able to be delivered to my home. So this is an opportunity for people who otherwise might not be able to afford, or their homes don't face in the right direction to be able to put solar panels on the roof. I'm in that situation myself. I can't put them on my roof. So this is a way for me to partner with somebody else to be able to invest in a solar system outside of my direct property that I live at. So 19 other states have done this, as well as Washington, D.C., and I think this is legislation that really will have an opportunity to get signed into law this year. I think there will be Republican support. I think the governor will support it, and I'm looking forward to that. In regard to other solar initiatives, you know, the way I view things right now, we are in a bridge time. We have the opportunity right now with natural gas that we have here. We have an abundance of it, but it's not going to last forever. There's only a limited supply of fossil fuels that we have, whatever that supply is. And we have to be conscious as we're moving forward of what that's going to be. We're talking about nuclear energy. There's been a lot of focus on the future of nuclear here in Pennsylvania, and I'm a supporter of nuclear. And I think we have to make sure that we are providing all different sorts of energy levels to make sure that we can transition from fossil fuels to cleaner energy. And so we have this bridge right now, which is natural gas, of how do we go from where we're at right now and what we're relying on to being renewable and cleaner energy.
Thank you. Senator Udicek.
Thank you. Should government address climate change? Yes. It's the most significant challenge of the 21st century for both the United States government and every state government in the country. So yes, we need to be doing more and more to address climate change. Should we be doing more to invest in clean energy, renewables? Yes. Representative Coffer referenced the nuclear industry. 93% of our carbon-free emissions in terms of electric generation in Pennsylvania comes from nuclear. We have 2 plants that are scheduled to close of our 5. They are under a tremendous stress because of the changes in the energy market in Pennsylvania and in the country. We are introducing legislation, along with my Republican colleague in the Senate, Ryan Ahmet, we co-chaired the Nuclear Caucus. We met for about 2 years, had expert testimony throughout that time, and we've developed a bill that would open up the Alternative Energy Portfolio Standards Act, an act that I supported back in the early 2000s that invests in wind and solar and waste coal technology, hydro technology. We would be placing a 3rd tier into that act that would include nuclear. We need to drive our energy market to more carbon-free electric generation, but we also have to look to technologies in the natural gas industry, and many of those companies are moving towards methane capture. If you want to help on the climate change side, you have to capture methane. So we need, Pennsylvania's blessed, we have a very diverse energy portfolio, very diverse. We need to make sure that we continue to have a diverse energy portfolio. Natural gas happens to be the cheapest source of fuel right now, but we shouldn't put all our eggs in one basket. We did that back in the 19th century with coal. That did not work out very well. So I don't want to make the same mistake. I want to learn from history. I want to invest in a diverse energy portfolio. I want to invest in renewable energies and carbon-free generation, and I want to do all I can to address climate change as the Democratic chair of the Environmental and Energy Committee in the Senate.
Thank you. Representative Paszynski.
Thank you. Well, I guess it depends on what you believe. Some people say there is no climate change. Some people say we don't have a problem. There's a lot of people that are opposing the idea of clean energy. So the way I look at it, I'm going to believe those that have studied this issue. And our scientists tell us 90-some percent, 93, 96, 98% of our scientists tell us we've got a problem here. And as you can see, the senator, through his efforts, there's a lot of conversation regarding to what we can do. The process is the transition. Nobody wants to eliminate the coal immediately. Nobody wants to eliminate the oil immediately. It's a process so that those businesses can still operate, still maintain jobs, and transition in a respectable manner so that we can protect our planet. So far, I don't think there's any other planet that's close enough for us to move to in case we mess this place up. So this is our responsibility. And how's that? That's pretty
great.
quick. I'll give you
Thank you. Representative Carroll.
Very briefly, climate change is real. It demands attention on the federal and state level. And if we don't take immediate steps to try and reduce the carbon that enters our atmosphere, there is going to be an even higher price paid than it's already been paid.
Thank you.
Very quickly, I promise. So I too believe in climate change, and in my opinion, Republicans have to stop burying their head in the sand on this issue. I think it's a very real issue, and everyone on every level of government needs to be serious about it. But I also think, I wanted to comment, Senator Udicek talked about the pricing issue that is in regard to what's happening with the nuclear industry. Because of how much natural gas we have right now, and there's the pipelines being built right now to get out to other markets, we have in the short term a much lower price for natural gas because of the amount that we have and not being able to get it to other markets. So it's a short-term issue that we are facing here with nuclear until the price stabilizes when there is an increased demand because of things like the pipelines and others that are being built out, or the pipelines don't go forward to being shipped out of here and creating those types of trade networks. But because of the short term of not being able to get the natural gas to market, there's a much lower price of natural gas. It is pricing nuclear and other industries out, which is only in the short term. So as this continues to happen, we have to be looking towards the long term, and that's why we have this issue with nuclear right now. It is a short-term, market-driven issue that we have.
Thank you. The next question will first be addressed to Senator Udicek, and this is one from the audience. What will the Pennsylvania legislature, or how do you see this, do to protect funding for reproductive health and a woman's right to choose, especially given the recent federal order that funding will not be provided to clinics who either refer a woman for an abortion or provide those services?
That is, as I mentioned, bipartisan success story in education. The issue of reproductive rights, health care rights, that is not generally a bipartisan issue. We have a governor that is very supportive. We have a General Assembly, particularly leaders of the General Assembly, that see it a different way, and I don't see one of those bills moving through the General Assembly anytime soon.
Yeah, succinctly. Representative Paszynski, do you have anything to add to that?
Your question again?
It was about initiatives for women's reproductive rights in the legislature, and as Senator Udicek said, it's really not a bipartisan effort, and so you don't see it as maybe something that's going to be in the 2019 session. But do you have anything to add to that about initiatives?
I agree. It's a very divisive issue and a very personal issue. We're going to continue to struggle with that for time in memoriam until people finally realize that guys don't have babies.
Representative Carroll.
one of the thorniest of all issues, in my opinion, for me especially. The starting point for me is that we do have a U.S. Supreme Court decision, Roe v. Wade, and recent efforts in Pennsylvania's General Assembly to reduce a woman's right to choose beyond Roe v. Wade have been, I've been an opponent of those efforts. It's still hard. There's passion on both sides of this issue, and at least for me, when it comes to future decisions with respect to a woman's right to choose, it starts with what does Roe v. Wade say and how we proceed from there.
Thank you. Representative Coffer.
Yeah, I think obviously this has been thrust in the spotlight because of some of the legislation that surrounding states have also moved in regard to New York and what has been discussed in Virginia. There has been bills, very few. We consistently have a bill that we are at a 24-week limit in Pennsylvania, is where there can no longer be an abortion that could take place without extreme medical issues that are in regard. There has been legislation to take that to 20 weeks as opposed to 24 weeks based on the viability of the child that can live outside the womb, that because of medical technology that has taken place, that there is a greater likelihood that a child can live at the 20-week mark. And so there has been legislation that that has been done. We are one of very few countries, it's North Korea, China, a few that actually allow at 24 weeks. It's very, very few. And so this 20-week would actually reflect a lot more of what not only the country is doing, but many European countries. It's much more in line with what majority of the world is doing. Very few are at the 24-week mark.
Okay, thank you. The next question will first be addressed to Representative Pashinsky, and we're on to the controversial questions now. This concerns the legalization of marijuana or decriminalization of marijuana. Currently, the Lieutenant Governor is conducting citizens meetings across the state to ask people their views. Do you support the legalization of marijuana? And if so, do you support it as a revenue source for Pennsylvania?
Well, if you noticed a couple of weeks ago in the Citizens' Voice, they quoted many of us relative to this, and I'll tell you how I'm looking at it now. My statement relates back to liquor. You know, it was against the law. We had prohibition. It didn't work. We now regulate laws, and we follow through on that. We also gain dollars from that sale of liquor. It's more controlled, and those dollars then come back to serve the people of Pennsylvania. I also utilize the example of the casinos. For over 10 years, we prohibited any casinos in Pennsylvania. You know, gambling was against the law, whatever. You're not allowed to have the casinos. So for over 10 years, billions of dollars of Pennsylvania dollars went to New Jersey, and New Jersey profited by Pennsylvania's dollars. And now we have marijuana. And if New York and New Jersey legalize it, which they appear that they will, once again, our Pennsylvania dollars will go to New York and New Jersey, and instead of us taking hold of it and taking charge, regulating it and making it as safe as possible, controlling the process of growing and selling, millions and billions of dollars will go to those states. Now, the reason I'm saying it in this fashion is simply this. As human beings, there are those of us that want to drink. As human beings, there are those of us that want to gamble. You will not stop it. And it's the same thing with this thing called marijuana. You know, it took a long time to get the medical marijuana. And the medical marijuana is working. If you could have heard the stories about the children, the parents coming to us and demonstrating how that medical marijuana can improve the life of those children with those seizures. It was an easy fix. It's working. Now, are people taking advantage of it? Are people now trying to take the medical marijuana and alter it and do different things? Yes, that's called life. How about vaping? Vaping was a good thing because it was supposed to help people that were smoking get off of vaping. Get off of that by using vaping. Now what did the industry do? Now they're providing vaping with different kind of taste and colors. Now they're attracting kids to it. So this is the constant battle that we face as human beings. These are the frailties of human beings. I would prefer to control it, regulate it, and protect the people making it legal.
Thank you. Representative Carroll.
Another tough one. I would say that, and I was a supporter of medical marijuana, it seems to me the next logical step is to decriminalize small amounts and to try and solve two problems at the same time, reduce the burden on our criminal justice system and recognize the fact that there are some folks in the community that engage in this, in doing this. For me, it would be a harder leap to get to recreational marijuana approval across the state. Very briefly, what I would simply say is decriminalization as the next step, see how that works out and go from there.
Thank you. Representative Coffer.
I also don't see it moving anytime soon, but I'm going to go a little bit longer than my colleagues here. I do think we should be pushing for decriminalization at the very least, criminal justice reform in regard to people who are being jailed in regard to smoking marijuana. If you were given a choice right now of tobacco, alcohol, and marijuana, and what should be legal and what shouldn't be legal, and let's all do studies right now, I could tell you if you were picking 2 out of the 3 or 1 out of the 3, it wouldn't be marijuana, that would be the illegal one. And so I truly believe that. I think it is a mixed message signal that we're sending to kids while states are legalizing. And I think we're sending an issue of the gateway type issue by having the prohibition. I think people are going to drug dealers who then have access to these clients, and then the money from marijuana stays in the hands of drug dealers who are able to push harder and harder drugs, and it becomes a larger snowball that continues to build instead of it being out of the hands of drug dealers. If you legitimize the revenue and get the drug dealers out of that trade, then you'll see that it'll be much easier to target these types of drug dealers, focus the DEA on the harder drugs, and I think we need to redraw the line of where things are right now. The war on drugs has failed, especially when it comes to marijuana. It has failed. And so if we're looking at the way it's working right now, it's not. People are out there smoking. It's all over the place. I think, we can try to pretend like it doesn't exist, but people who are smoking pretty much are, if we had a way to resolve the issue of people who were driving under the influence, if we could tell if somebody was high at that point that they were driving, it would probably be resolved already. But the fact that we can only tell if somebody's done it in the last 30 days or whatever it is from these, urine samples or hair samples, that's the issue that I see. And so, obviously, we don't want people out there, driving under the influence of anything, just like we shouldn't have people who are driving without enough sleep. They shouldn't be driving drunk, any of those types of issues. But if we're going to have the economic impact of trying to get people away from opioids, and I can talk about that, and I won't go on that tangent now, but maybe later, but that if we want to get people away from opioids, you've got to get the money out of the dealers who are pushing those heavier drugs. And so you get marijuana money and the stream of so many people doing that away from that, you won't have that gateway theory of people moving on to the next drug. And I truly believe that the revenue is something that obviously comes along with the legalization end of this. The Auditor General has put forward numbers. I think it's close to $580 million that could be generated from this. I haven't looked at those numbers myself, but those are the numbers he says are conservative numbers. It wouldn't surprise me that if the numbers are very high, but whatever they are significant dollars that are out there if we were to legalize marijuana. But I come back to the idea that I don't think it's moving anytime soon. I don't think there have been comments from both the majority leaders in the House and Senate saying, I think the Senate leader said over my dead body or something along those lines, or not while I'm here. I forget the exact remark, but it was the right sentiment at least. And I think everybody's waiting to see how the rest of medical marijuana plays out. It's obviously a newer industry here. I was part of the work group that worked on that legislation to get that across the finish line. So So I'm very proud that we were able to get that done, get it to the patients, and now we should be having a robust conversation amongst our community. I've had a number of people who've called my office. I've talked with them about these issues, about my perspective, and why I think it is the direction we should be going in. So I'm open to have that discussion with anybody that wants, that has a different perspective than myself, but that is where I'm coming from.
Thank you. Senator Udicek.
Thank you. I try to make informed decisions on these difficult issues, on the issue of marijuana. It struck me that there's only one person on the panel today that was a rock star in the 1960s. So I will look to him for guidance on this issue.
What are you implying?
That was great.
The issue, we have medical marijuana that's in its infancy in Pennsylvania. To quickly layer legalization of recreational marijuana is going to be a difficult challenge in the General Assembly. Do we need to examine it? Can it be done safely? That's the kind of prism that I will use. Can it be done safely and responsibly? It should not be looked at as a revenue source. I am growing weary of legislators who do everything they possibly can not to support a responsible tax, like a responsible severance tax. So they look to liquor, they look to gaming, they look to other vices, other sin taxes, cigarette taxes in Pennsylvania. They look to all of these other ways that really don't generate responsible, sustainable revenue for the Commonwealth. So I hope the debate is, can it be done safely? I agree with, I think every legislator said it. We have to decriminalize it. It's been done in our cities. I think criminal justice reform has to be a part of that, but it is going to be a slow process in the General Assembly on this issue.
Thank you. We only have about a half an hour left, and I'd like to provide each of the legislators with an opportunity to talk about their personal agendas and the committee's initiatives they're working on. I do have just some questions from the audience about do you support tuition-free college and universities, if you care to address that, or how can the playing field be leveled with state versus private PIAA status? But if those could be answered with, in addition to your own legislative priorities, but we have about a half an hour. So this would go to Representative Pashinsky first.
Okay, the first part was the free education? All right.
Tuition-free college and university.
Tuition-free college. We provide free public education, K through 12, or 1 through 12, which isn't free, is it? Because we all pay for that, but we recognize that it is important for our children. I really think that there's a way that we could provide a payback system. In other words, if we provide our kids with a free community college, we can't afford a 4-year, but community college where your cost is anywhere from $1,200 to $2,000 per semester, and in 2 semesters you get an associate degree and you're out working. Once you get the job, you can figure out what percentage you want, 0.5%, 1%, 1.5%. They then pay that back. That's all. This is not a hard thing. So you can't give everybody everything for free because nothing is for free. Somebody has to pay for it somewhere. But to prevent a young child, to prevent a young person who has the ability to become a productive person in society, getting a living wage, now earning that wage, buying products, buying a home, buying a car, contributing back in their taxes, should be the ultimate goal. The education is the way to get them to get that job. Once they get the job, they can pay it back over time.
Thank you. Representative Carroll.
Student debt is out of control. We have far, far too much debt that's carried by folks that graduate from 4-year or even 2-year institutions. And the Commonwealth needs to do a better job. Sadly, over the course of the last number of years, the Commonwealth has not been a fair partner with those, like the students that are here with us today, with respect to higher ed. And so I am fully prepared to make sure that the Commonwealth directs the necessary resources to reduce the cost of higher ed. But it would be disingenuous, I think, to sit here today and say that there's a path to us to provide a free 4-year college degree for students. As Eddie said, there will be a cost associated with that. And if the Commonwealth is prepared to embrace that kind of a cost, I'd be surprised by that debate. It just seems to me that the way Pennsylvania governance works, a leap that far seems unbelievably unlikely to me. And so, having said that, and I serve on the FIA board, I know Senator Udicek did as well for a period of time, I think that we can do a far better job with making sure that we have grant programs that are more robust with respect to students, especially some of the lower income students. I think that we can do a better job of providing funding for our community colleges and our state system schools and the institutional grants that end up with the private universities. There's a range of things that the Commonwealth does, but none of them are especially robust. And again, we're back to the common denominator that was mentioned more than once today, and that is money. And somehow we're going to have to figure out a way to pay for additional funds for all of those things that I just mentioned. And I look forward and would be willing to vote for those things. But I don't envision a moment in time in the near future where we're going to have a serious debate about free college tuition. If the federal government were to make such a step to provide funds available to the states to augment what we have or what we could do, maybe there's a path. But the states by themselves, without federal support and a national policy to provide free college education, I don't know how you manage such a thing. Imagine if Pennsylvania does have free college tuition and New York and New Jersey do not, and how do you manage the movement of students from one family to another? I'm going to go live with grandma so I can get the free education in the neighboring state. It just seems to be that that sort of a policy needs to be a national policy and not just state-driven.
Thank you. I'd like to reiterate, if you wish to speak to something that you're specifically interested in, your legislative agenda, feel free to do so.
Okay, I'm hoping we're going to have one more round to do that, because I do want to address the two questions that were asked.
Absolutely.
So our higher education system here in Pennsylvania is a little disjointed. We have a very diverse way of funding our state education. I see Dr. Baldino shaking his head, and he knows it. So we have our state-owned universities, we have our state-related universities, our community colleges, and our privates. So those are sort of the four categories that we have. So let's start with our state-owned, our PASHE system that we've had a study looking at how we can do a better job of taking care of our system here for our PASHE system. That's not really where the focus of my conversation is. I think there's things we could be doing to specialize better within our PASHE system, to have specific schools that really focus and have a really high-tech end on how they're doing specific programs, that we don't need every program at every school, but very good programs at fewer schools. So that is sort of my focus on PASHE, but that's not the soapbox I'm going to get on today. The soapbox I want to get on today is in regard to our state-relateds. And I am a huge Penn State fan. I watch every game that I can, but Penn State University is not a state-owned university. They are a state-related university. And why are they called state-related? Because we give them a lot of money. And so if you want to give me a lot of money, you can call me state-related too. And so that is actually what we're doing with Penn State, Pitt, Temple. These are some of the schools that are state-related that receive hundreds of millions of dollars, and we also pay for the pension costs of these colleges and universities, and they're not technically state employees. And so if we want to talk about how we can better get money to students to make it more affordable, we actually have to have the colleges and universities competing for students. And so right now it's students competing to get into the colleges and universities to try to get acceptance, that acceptance process, what school am I going to? I want to see a better system where we are putting those dollars that are going into those state-relateds and others and put them into the FIA program. So Pennsylvania high school graduates can choose what schools they want to go to. You can choose whether you want to go to a state-related or to a state-owned or to a community college or to a private university. But right now students don't have the flexibility to make those choices because we as the state are directing already where those dollars go. I want the students to make the choice on what is going to be their best opportunity to choose a school and a university. I think students should have that ability. And if we were to put those dollars into FIA, it's it's thousands and thousands of dollars more that we would be contributing to what students are. Right now, the grant is somewhere around $4,000. With the Pell Grant, I believe it's another $7,000, $6,000, somewhere in that ballpark. So if you actually put this and make that 3 times more, 4 times more for FIA, you're talking about a total of close to $25,000 to $30,000 that you could be giving to students to say, you pick the school you want to go to. Right now, those costs are being absorbed by the administration. They're not coming back to students. And like I said, I'm a Penn State fan too, okay? James Franklin gets $4.6 million, right? And his $4.6 million, and guess what? We're giving him a state pension too. You know, you look at our pension costs and you see all the presence of these universities and professors, and not that they don't deserve to make a good wage, but to make a good wage, and then we're also paying for the pensions and health care for life of these individuals for being state-related, not state-owned. And so I have a big issue with the way that our current funding stream works. We need to get the money to the students to compete so that they have the opportunity to choose the schools and universities that they actually get accepted in. I don't want to see a student who gets accepted into Penn or a great university like Lafayette as well. Sorry. And not be able to afford to go to that school. And so if we give the money to the students, let them make the economic choice of where they want to go instead of directly to the administrations that are absorbing the costs and not getting to the students. We have to be much more proactive. By doing one very last thought, I just want to, community colleges, I think that will also give the opportunity as well to make, if we do that FIA system, to actually make community colleges free.
Great.
And so that's a long way of going about an answer, but I think it's complicated and worth those extra couple of points.
Thank you. Senator Udicek? No? Okay. So if you want to speak, I think this will be the round where you might want to give some closing remarks, starting with Representative or Senator Udicek. We could start with you.
This is the closing argument?
Well, yeah, I'm going to get whatever you want to, if you want to talk about Restore Pennsylvania.
I just want to, I want to highlight Luzerne County delegation, Democrats, Republicans, House and Senate, over the last couple of years, really have worked very well together on the economic development front. We have a success story that's unfolding in the South Valley, in Hanover Township, in Nanticoke, and surrounding areas where over the years, the Earth Conservancy has been able to reclaim thousands of acres of mine-scarred land, put that land back into productive use, whether that was preserving our green space, the growth of the Pinchot State Forest, which went from about 8,000 acres 10 years ago to over 48,000 acres today. That's the collective effort of all of us from Luzerne County that represent you in the General Assembly. That's an incredible success story. We're going to have an announcement Monday of another new business coming to northeastern Pennsylvania. We are talking about taking land that for 50 years or more was a dead zone, an economic dead zone, an environmental dead zone, and now what is happening is we're seeing the creation of nearly 5,000 new jobs, the investment of $1 billion in private equity, all because legislators work together to invest in the $90 million South Valley Parkway, to invest $22 million in the Earth Conservancy, to do that reclamation. There's a great success story happening here in northeastern Pennsylvania. If you look in the newspaper, on the billboards, what do you see each and every day? Something you've not seen for many, many decades here in northeastern Pennsylvania. Job opportunity after job opportunity after job opportunity. That's a big part of the effort that we've made over the last 20 years to invest in our infrastructure, invest in our schools, to invest in our universities, King's, Wilkes, Luzerne County Community College, Misericordia, Penn State, Wilkes-Barre, and Hazleton. We have great resources here in northeastern Pennsylvania, and you're starting to see that investment pay off in the creation of thousands of jobs and the investments of billions of dollars in the people in northeastern Pennsylvania. It's great to be a part of it, and I enjoy working with my legislative colleagues to get these things done.
Thank you. Representative Paszynski.
Thank you very much once again to the League, Susan, for being here. You're obviously troopers because you stayed through all of this jibber-jabber. But I like to always make the point that the public generally sees the tip of the iceberg. We see the whole iceberg, above the surface and below. And the issues that we've talked about today are very complicated, complex, and there are many different views of which people have their right in order to come to an agreement or come to a decision. I want to emphasize once again to all of you that you are really the power, and I appreciate your being here today. More and more people have to be as active as you are, but also I ask that you find the truth, make your decisions based upon fact. Too much misinformation is out there which confuses the public. For me personally, I'm going to continue. We didn't talk about health care today. Health care is based on 3 words: affordable, accessible, and quality. I say to you today that health care is not affordable, so therefore it is not accessible and it is not quality because you can't get it. We pay $3.5 trillion in this country. We pay more than double than any other industrialized nation which provided universal health care for all of their citizens, and we still here struggle trying to pay our bills. There was a time in the mid-90s when a gold plan by health care for a family of 4 would cost, anybody want to take a guess? $4,000 to $4,500 for that plan for the whole year. The same plan today is $20,000 to $24,000. Healthcare is sucking the money out of our economic system, and people have to wake up and start saying, wait a minute, what's going on? That leads me to the next phrase, which is monopolies. These companies are so humongous, they're too big to fail. You don't know that you're being raped and robbed, but you are. So healthcare is going to be definitely an issue. I'm going to continue to work on what I promised in this last election to help reduce your property taxes. That's why the complexity of public education needs to be discussed. We're going to have a hearing this Thursday on other avenues that do not cost the average individual 1 dime that we could utilize to help reduce those costs. I'm going to continue to work on grandparents raising grandchildren. I'm very proud to say that we put together a foundation here through the Luzerne Foundation that we are going to be initiating help to our local grandparents in Luzerne County that have to deal with this incredible tragedy that we're faced because of the opioids and alcohol addiction. So those are some of the issues that I'm going to continue to work on, and believe me, we're never out of things to do in Harrisburg. But thank you very much for inviting us and allowing us this time to present our case to you.
Thank you. Representative Carroll.
Thank you, Susan, and thank all of you for spending your Saturday morning with us. Eleanor Roosevelt said that you cannot be a good leader unless you have great followers. And I can tell you the 65,000 folks that I represent in Lackawanna, Luzerne County are great followers because most often they become leaders along with me. And I can tell you it's the greatest of pleasures to represent the folks that I do in northeastern Pennsylvania, and I beam with pride every day of the improvements that I see across not just my district, but across our region. I will concede that we are not perfect. We have warts, we have flaws, but we have made tremendous, tremendous strides to improve the quality of life in northeastern Pennsylvania, and that is the work product of so many people, the folks at this table, our federal partners, and often overlooked our local partners. Those who serve in local government, county government, and on school boards have thankless jobs, but they have really important jobs. And I think that when we look at the improvements that we see across our region, we have many, many folks to thank in local government and in our community. I'm proud to be a partner with all of the folks that I represent, all of the folks that I serve with. We've made tremendous strides. We have much to do, but we have a lot to be proud of, and I thank you all for being here today.
Thank you. Representative Coffer.
Thank you, and thank you, everybody, for sitting through. It does count as an audited class for those of you who stayed awake during all of Representative Pashinsky's remarks, but he'll be there to sign your documents after this is over. But I have a pretty aggressive legislative agenda this year. I have about 20 bills that I have sponsored that I'm trying to get done. It's very aggressive. It's a number of bills that have gotten close to the finish line, but not quite over the finish line. So I'm going to try to run through just a few of my favorites very quickly. There's a bill I'm working on that I call it Exit Boot Camp. It's to provide extra services for our men and women who are leaving the military so that we can actually have a better transition program from when they leave the military to actually get them not only to provide the services to help them get back into the workforce, but also to do screenings for if there's any mental health issues. 22 veterans a day committing suicide. It's not acceptable. We need to be doing a better job. I talked quickly before already about mental health behavioral support within our schools, trying to get people in our schools to help support our teachers and guidance counselors. I'm going to continue to work on the workforce development and welfare to work programs that I've spearheaded in the legislature since getting elected, trying to break the cycle of poverty, build the middle class with a helping hand up. And right now, I think too many people, they earn that extra little bit, they lose their benefits, and their family suffers because of having these major benefits cliffs that people fall off of and not able to actually climb themselves out of poverty. And so those are the big issue. That's a big issue I'm working on. Two little more wonkier issues that I'm working on. There's an issue called Last Man In. It's a transportation-related issue that when you have development that is happening near a state roadway and actually it changes the network of the roadway to be deficient, what happens is the developers are gouged by the state, and I use gouge because I don't think they should be paying typically $10 to $12 million to fix the state lighting system and the traffic infrastructure system. They are required to pay for it, yet it is still a state asset. And so I think it's wrong that developers are forced to pay before they even put a shovel in the ground for the project they're trying to do, that the state is going to say, you owe us $10 to $12 million up front in order to fix this roadway. Now, Representative Carroll and there's a major funding issue with PennDOT. We're coming up with some innovative ways on how we can fund this, working with PennDOT to make sure that we can uncap the potential of these developments going forward, because they will pay for themselves if we allow these developments to move forward. Lastly, in regard to opioids and autism and intellectual disabilities, I'm working on a bill with insurance transparency. In my opinion, insurance companies have way too much power. And before I lose my train of thought, I want to give credit to Representative Pashinsky. He has a prescription drug task force that he's introduced that I'm a co-sponsor of through the State Government Commission to look at how we can lower prescription drug prices. I'm really excited about that. I want to work forward. I'm pushing that to get that done. But in regard to insurance transparency, when it comes to behavioral health, we typically can't see the numbers for private insurance. There was a hearing recently where there was a lot of pressure from the drug and alcohol service providers who said, well, you know, they aren't doing this, they're not following what the law is, and they said, okay, and they said, I wish we could audit them, So one of the companies, I won't say who, said, we'll do an audit, we're going to do an audit. And they did the audit, and they said, we'll report it in 6 or 8 months. I don't remember exactly what it was. And so they did an audit on their drug and alcohol programs, and actually it showed that there were 133 violations out of every 100 patients. More than one violation per patient when it comes to drug and alcohol. When it came to autism and intellectual disabilities, there was 120 for every 100. More than one incident, once again, for people with autism and intellectual disabilities. So now is the opportunity, I think, that we can be beating back against the insurance companies to be following the law and doing what they're supposed to be doing, because when it comes to coverage for drug and alcohol, there's a 28-day minimum coverage. What's actually happened that the insurance companies aren't following doctors' recommendations. They are, instead of it being a floor, it has become a ceiling that people only get 28 days. They don't get extended beyond that, and people then get back out, they relapse. 28-day programs don't work. The medical professionals are pretty much in unison on that, and so we need to make sure we're putting more pressure on the insurance companies to be doing what they're supposed to be doing according to the law. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you. I would like to make a few announcements before we close so I don't forget. The League of Women Voters 2019 Government Directory, we have copies on the table. It just came out. Michelle is holding it up back there. She does a great job on it. It provides you information, contact information on from the president on down to your school board. So it's a great resource to have. Lastly, I'd like to thank our legislators. They do such a great job.
Susan.
I always feel so pleased and informed on the issues. I think we covered a great deal and learned a lot about, what they're working on and the nuances to going to the state capitol and working for us. So thanks again. Representative Coffer, Senator Udicek, Representative Paszynski, and Representative Carroll. Thank you.